I think the Charter Commission conceives of itself as like above politics. We're just here for good government and efficiency. We're just a bunch of lawyers here and friends of lawyers who are doing what's right and efficient. We're removing politics from the process. We don't have politics. We're removing politics from the process. I think there's a lack of imagination on their part, like conceiving of a world in which one day they think the mayor is bad, like they disagree with the mayor, it's a mayor they didn't vote for, or worse, someone terribly corrupt and stupid who makes some really bad decisions. And boy, wouldn't it be nice if we didn't strip the city council of the authority to approve that person's appointments for very important jobs.
We're rolling. We're rolling.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.
I definitely have nothing going on. We're a couple of guys who have nothing going on, who spend a lot of time watching Charter Commission meetings.
That's right. And that's our holiday gift to the listeners, is we listen to the Charter Commission meetings so they don't have to.
The sad part is I don't even know that I'm going to air this before the new year. We could have done it later. It's just I wanted to have our thoughts down on audio.
Sure.
While it was still fresh. Since we were at that meeting, was it Monday or Tuesday? I can't remember.
Monday. It may make sense to air it after the new year. Normal people may not be thinking about the Charter Commission over the holidays.
Or they are so irritated with their family that they're listening to a lot of podcasts. They have their ears full of our voices. We're the only people they can tolerate in their life right now. I agree with you, though. I think I'm going to air it in the new year. This is the Wedge Live podcast. I'm your host, John Edwards. I'm joined by Josh Martin.
Glad to be here again, John.
Okay, and I think this one needs a preamble. I don't usually read a script to introduce an episode because I'm bad at this, and also I think I sound really stilted when I'm reading. You can tell when people on podcasts are reading things, and it's not engaging. And so I'm usually off the top of my head here, but this needs a preamble. And a lot of people just don't follow the Charter Commission and don't know what's going on. This is kind of undercover stuff. So let's do a preamble. So first of all, we're talking about something that could end up on the 2024 ballot for Minneapolis voters. And if you think back to 2021, the government structure vote has turned out to be more consequential than I think most people were aware of at the time. A significant transfer of power from the council, a body of 13 elected officials to create a strong mayor system. One person as leader of the city's executive branch. And so more than 2 years later, the Minneapolis City Council is still trying to reconstitute itself as a functioning legislative branch after having their power to direct department staff, for example, having that stripped away. A couple of weeks ago, they allocated some money to hire analysts and oversight staff. They did a couple of other things. They're one term in, they're still rebuilding themselves as a legislative branch. Do I have all that correct, Josh? Anything you would add to that?
I think that's right. And I think I would perhaps add that they have made some progress recently in rebuilding themselves as a legislative branch. There were a number of amendments adopted in this past budget that I think will be helpful in that regard.
Yeah. Another reminder, that 2021 government restructuring, I don't know if maybe a lot of people who listen to this podcast know that, but that was put on the ballot by the Charter Commission. The reason it was on the ballot is the Charter Commission. That was their big idea. There was a campaign funded by the Chamber of Commerce. They really liked the idea of the Minneapolis Chamber of Commerce. And so that is I'm going to get into some editorializing here, Josh. The Charter Commission is this is my definition, a judicially appointed body of mostly senior citizens, significantly more conservative than the kind of person who gets elected in Minneapolis. Now the Charter Commission might go further, and here's what we're here to talk about today, putting a proposal on the ballot, making it so the city council no longer votes to confirm the mayor's appointments to lead certain city departments. It will be a significant reduction in the number of people the council has the power to vote to confirm.
Yeah, looks like the council currently confirms 12 positions, and this would reduce it to 5. So that's a fairly significant reduction.
Yeah. And so they haven't actually acted yet. Josh and I today will be reacting and talking about things that were talked about at the initial work group meeting on this issue, their appointments, the Charter Commission's appointments work group. But I tend to take that kind of seriously because I'm having flashbacks to 21, hearing these same kind of conversations. I know where these people are coming from. They seem kind of enthusiastic about this. The Charter Commissions who are, I would consider leaders, thought leaders maybe, if I can use that phrase. The ones who spend a lot of time, the ones that other ones seem to listen to, have some strong opinions, it seems to me, about this. And so at this point, I think it's going to be on the ballot. Something will be on the ballot, and it's a question of what that will be. I tend to think they will pretty aggressively try to scale back the council's power, but we'll see. Again, they haven't acted, but it's something people should keep an eye on. And that's why we're talking about it here today.
I think that's right. There seemed to be fairly little appetite on the Charter Commission to just put nothing on the ballot and leave the number of council positions subject to council confirmation the same as it is now. Most Charter Commissioners seemed either supportive of going with this proposal or potentially some sort of middle ground where there would be maybe not quite as much of a reduction. They would add back in a few more positions, but still fewer than the council confirms currently.
Tell us the jobs that are currently subject to council confirmation vote, mayoral appointments subject to council confirmation vote, that would no longer be if this proposal was adopted.
The positions that are currently subject to confirmation but would no longer be subject to confirmation would be the city assessor, the public works director, the civil rights director, the health commissioner, the CPED director, the regulatory services director, and the emergency management director. The positions that would still be subject to council confirmation would be the 3 executive officers, which is the community safety commissioner, the city operations officer, the city attorney, and then also 2 department heads, the fire chief and police chief.
So some of these are pretty big. Like the city assessor, no one could tell you who that is. I agree that's pretty low profile, but also has it ever been a problem that we had a confirmation vote for the city assessor? So my first reaction, this feels like a solution in search of a problem, that old cliche. Let's run through the arguments coming out of the Charter Commission to see if there actually is a problem here, if they have a point. Spoiler alert, they don't have a point, but let's give it a fair hearing here. So some of the arguments are public hearing process is too harsh. These candidates don't want to subject themselves to mean questions, the public scrutiny. It's a very painful process to them. That's one argument. These department head jobs should be insulated from politics. They should be professionalized, career people. That's another argument. And then the third big one that I'm hearing is this is needed to follow through on the 2021 government restructuring to eliminate the 14 bosses problem. That's the third big argument I'm hearing. So a continuation of giving the executive branch more power, getting the council out of doing their bossiness, having influence over department heads. Any that I'm missing? Are there any big ones? There are a few more silly ones that I want to make fun of, but are there big serious ones that you think I'm missing there, Josh?
No, I don't think so. I think certainly their big concern was that was the public hearing process, as you mentioned. And that permitting the confirmation process allows the council to exert influence over department heads, which was one of the things they wanted to get away from in the strong mayor system. They also talked about a more independent professional staff, independent from politics somehow.
Independent from the council's politics, not independent from the mayor's politics. I'm getting ahead of myself here, but one of the silly things the clerk was saying was, the mayor is losing too, because he will no longer appoint these people, not mentioning the fact that the mayor's appointments, the mayor's political appointments, the city operations officer, for example, will be picking a lot of the people who fill these jobs. And do we not think the mayor is going to have a conversation with his political appointee? Margaret Anderson Kelleher is in that job now. He's not going to have conversations with her about who maybe she would pick to be public works director, which is a hugely important job that touches so many parts of what the city does. It has an enormous budget, touches things like parking and bike lanes, and do we have clean water and a bunch of other stuff? That's a very political job. Do we think the mayor is not going to say, hey, maybe we hire this person, not that person? I got a person in mind for this job. Maybe we hire them. I feel so insulted that the clerk used that argument. Like, does he think we're all stupid when he said that?
So I similarly was troubled by that argument. Even if the mayor is not directly appointing the people, he's appointing the people who are appointing the people. So I think he has still pretty direct, and not only is he appointing him, but unlike the council with their role in the confirmation process, those people report to him on a day-to-day basis. He's their boss. So I think the mayor's not really giving up anything in any substantive sense, whereas the council is.
He's giving up having the hassle of getting his nominees through an appointment process. That's what he would be giving up.
I also, this idea generally that people would be insulated from politics, setting the issue of the mayor aside, I always am concerned by that argument, because whenever you have people, you have politics. Yeah. So the only way to completely insulate something from politics is for there to be no people.
You're insulating it from like the wider public, those
Correct.
Politics, and only subjecting them to city hall politics.
To city hall politics, so people who are, the city staff and the internal politics there, the politics of the mayor, and also outside groups that are better connected and more able to connect to the mayor's office and connect to city staff. I imagine that although perhaps ordinary people won't be able to participate in public hearing, won't be able to influence the process anymore because they might not even know it's happening anymore. I think groups like the Downtown Council will still find a way to influence who gets appointed to a lot of these positions.
Yeah, by telling the mayor, hey, I don't like the person you put in this job, and we helped you get elected, so... I don't know. It's either very naive or very cynical to be using arguments like that you think you can remove politics from politics. Insulating. Yep. And another word for that is we want City Hall to be less responsive. We think, and this is kind of like a senior caucus conception of how the world works, is that these big bad activist groups go down to City Hall and they get whatever they want because they've mobilized all these people, and we need to insulate City Hall from politics, which is kind of dumb. That's about making government less responsive, I think. That's how I take it. Let's get on to public hearings being too harsh. I'm going to quote Commissioner Ginder. And so context here, Commissioner Ginder was Mayor Fry's most recent interim city attorney. Was that like last year that he served in that role? This year? I lose track.
Yes, that was last year.
Okay. And so basically Mayor Fry's guy on the Charter Commission. A lot of Mayor Fry's people are on the Charter Commission. People who prefer his politics to the council's. That's underlying a lot of this. And so the words that Commissioner Ginder used...
And the public hearing is where most of the issue arises with our appointments process, because then anybody can come in with any grievance or whatever they might have, and we have these really long and sometimes very, very uncomfortable public hearings, and then the council then debates about what has been said by the public, and then they go ahead and then they make a decision. And many of those hearings are extremely unpleasant for the nominee.
About public hearings, they're long and uncomfortable. they're distasteful, they're unpleasant for the nominee, they're difficult, which creates a limited pool of applicants. There's something that prospective department heads, quote, won't go through. And so my comment on that is, if the most intense and potentially hostile part of, for example, a public works director's tenure is not going to be the public hearing, no matter how controversial that nominee might be. Like, it's a big job. It touches a lot of things, like I said, very controversial things. And so if you can't make it through the public hearing, if that's intimidating to you, then it's just not a job for you, right?
Yeah, I submitted some written comments to the Charter Commission. I think I mentioned that some of these positions are very public facing, and so if the public hearing is a barrier for you, you probably won't enjoy the next 4 years very much either. And the other thing I would say is, not all of the public hearings are very long and very uncomfortable.
Most are very tame. Most are very tame. Yeah. Take our word for it. We watch a lot of this stuff.
Certainly the ones that stand out in people's minds are very uncomfortable and very long. You tend to gloss over and forget the boring ones, but that's not all of them. I'm not even sure it's the majority when I look at these positions and try to think back on some of these. But certainly
we're basically
some of
thinking
them are uncomfortable.
We're basically thinking of Heather Johnston. That's and did she even get one? I think, was that her public hearing?
She did for city coordinator. And I think that's certainly the most famous example. I wouldn't say that's the only one. I think Cedric Alexander's public hearing might be one people are thinking of as well. Emergency management, Barrett Lane for emergency management, and there may be others that I'm not thinking of right now. But
as you list these off, I'm thinking, well, of course that one was like Cedric Alexander had his problems. One question I remember from that one was about like sexual harassment, very credible sexual harassment claims made against him in a previous job. Is that just not supposed to be asked? Who was the other one you mentioned? Barrett Lane, the emergency management director. Yeah. So in the wake of 2020, is the emergency management director not supposed to get uncomfortable, distasteful, unpleasant questions about the job he did as emergency management director? Whether you think it was his fault or not, like, he's in the job. Is he not supposed to get tough questions in a year or two after what happened in 2020?
Yeah.
And Heather Johnston, like, whether you think she's responsible or not, and again, she's in the job, there's clearly something going on in terms of a hostile / racist work environment in some of these city departments, of which she was the interim, I think, at that point. And so,
she was interim city coordinator at the time. Yep.
Again, like, big problems, tough issues, and difficult, uncomfortable, distasteful questions. So it's the job you're running, you're seeking. So deal with the public hearing.
Yeah, I would also say, in the subject of public hearings, there was some thoughts among the commissioners that perhaps there is maybe to the extent you agree the public hearing process is a problem, some of the commissioners seem to suggest that, well, perhaps the public hearing process should be revised rather than reducing the number of appointments. However, the commission doesn't have the power to do anything about that. That's under the scope of the council's rules. And the other thing I would say is that, and what concerns me about removing the public hearing aspect of it, that's not only taking away the council's power, that's also really taking away an opportunity for the public to weigh in on these appointments. Yeah. If they didn't flow through the council, if there was no public hearing, people wouldn't have, not only would they not have an opportunity to speak at a public hearing, they might not have an opportunity to weigh in at all, because you might not even know the appointment had happened until it gets announced in a big story in the Star Tribune.
Yeah. The mayor's press conference will be the first time you're hearing about it. You want this big, hard job? You can stand up to the tough questions. Distinction between political and professional staff. We've talked about that a little bit. And I keep coming back to the Public Works Department. That's a big department. And our most recent Public Works Director, Margaret Anderson Kelleher, she's not a career professional, like public works professional. She's former Speaker of the House, a current political appointee. Now she's a city operations officer. This is not to disparage Margaret Anderson Kelleher, but she doesn't need to be insulated from politics. She is politics.
Well, and her new position at least is one which would still have confirmation and was pretty widely agreed to be a political appointment. That's one they'll be answering directly to the mayor. But yes, to your point, prior to that, she was the Public Works Director, which is one of these allegedly apolitical positions.
And so taking away the council's power to have confirmed her appointment a couple of years ago, that would not have made her job any less political. It wouldn't have changed the way she carried out her job. I don't know. I don't want to go over this again and again, but it just feels obvious to me that these jobs are political. Let's do 14 bosses. The idea that this is a continuation of what we voted on in 2021, creating the strong mayor system. We need to keep combating the negative influence of our city council, removing 13 bosses from the equation and leaving the one boss, the mayor, to be completely in charge. So here's Commissioner Perry speaking about the effect of the public hearing and confirmation process. I think once you are making statements to the council, you're basically making commitments to them.
But I think once you are making statements to the council, you're basically making commitments to them. And they are then, therefore, your boss again. I don't think you really have moved away from what the intent of the charter change was to be.
That's a reference to the Q&A from council members. They'll say, well, what do you think about this? And if you don't follow local politics, it's a lot like presidential appointments or the Supreme Court appointment process, where senators will ask questions, say, what do you think about this potential Supreme Court justice? What would you do in this case? And mayoral appointees are a lot more straightforward than what you see at the federal level. And so you can learn a lot more, and it's a lot more collegial. Like, I think we think of confirmation hearings because a lot of people think about national politics as like totally hostile and combative, but these are pretty genial affairs. And like, what do you think about this? And everyone's a Democrat, right? That old phrase. And so it's very educational, and it's a way to learn about how these people think about things. And who cares if, again, I'll read the quote. I think once you are making statements to the council, you're basically making commitments to them. Now, you're making commitments about your worldview. And if you want to handle things another way, you could tell the truth about that and handle it that way. I don't know. Being asked to like give your perspective on your worldview at a public hearing is about telling the truth, not about like horse trading. I'm going to pretend I believe something else at this public hearing and make a commitment to go against my principles. No, just explain who you are. That's what a public hearing's about. I feel like I've rambled about this a ton, Josh. Do you have any reactions to that?
Certainly, even though we have had some more contentious public hearings, it's nothing compared to, national politics. And I do think there is value in the public hearing, that it introduces these officials, especially the more public-facing ones, to the public, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. I don't know if people can tell. I'm very worked up about this. It feels like a very minor issue, but it just feels so wrong, and it feels like a thing no one is going to pay attention to. It's like going to fly under the radar, just like the strong mayor thing. And it may not be the biggest deal in the world, but like bit by bit, we're doing bad things for the wrong reasons, and it kind of irritates me. Here's the category I call dumb arguments. So this is what the city council voted for. That was mentioned a Commissioner Garcia and the clerk mentioned it. Ramble on this one for me. Tell me what the city council voted for this. Explain that.
Yeah, so the city council did adopt the government structure ordinance in 2022, and the intent of that was to implement the strong mayor amendment. And there was a lot of discussion and debate over that. And one of the issues that was discussed was this one in particular: which position should be subject to council confirmation. Now, ultimately, it is correct that the council adopted the more or less the proposal that is included in this amendment. It was actually went even further than this. They included only the 3 executive officers, and police and fire were added in afterward. However, there was a proposed amendment offered by Councilmember Robin Wansley that would have actually not only maintained the current list of council confirmation, but would have expanded it to all department heads. And that amendment was rejected on a vote of 5-8. Council members Payne, Wansley, Ellison, Chavez, and Chugtai voted for it. The remaining council members voted against it. I think also important to note in that is that since that time, one council member has changed. Councilmember Andrew Johnson, who voted in favor of reducing the number of positions subject to council confirmation, has now been replaced by Councilmember Reen Chowdhury. And by the time this airs, Councilmember Katie Cashman will most likely have taken office. And she will have replaced Councilmember Lisa Goodman, who also voted in favor of reducing the number of council positions. So a council agreed to this compromise, but not this council, and I don't know that this council would agree to this compromise. So I think that argument left out some key facts.
Here's my very legalistic, lawyerly argument and rebuttal to that is, you know what we can't do by an 8-5 vote of the city council? Change the city charter. We can't do that. And so
Correct.
I don't care about your 8-5 city council vote on appointments, because that's in the city charter. And the city charter rules, and what you can't do by an 8-5 vote of the city council is change the city charter. So who cares is what I say to that. So one of the things about police and fire, that 8-5 vote to adopt into ordinance that only the COO and the community safety commissioner and the city attorney are subject to confirmation. Do we think anyone on the city council at that time thought, well, we're removing our power permanently to have any input on the police chief nominee or the fire chief nominee? I don't even know if I believe like Michael Rainville, for example, wanted to remove his ability to vote on the police chief.
Sure.
Or Emily Koski. Like, do we really think that was their intent with that vote? Because if you're saying that 8-5 vote means the council voted for something and that was to reduce their appointment power, then you're saying like Emily Koski, Michael Rainville, Latricia Vitaw all thought, well, I shouldn't have a vote on who the next police chief is. My role as a council member shouldn't involve voting on who the police chief or the fire chief should be. I don't think that's what they were doing. Is that what they were doing?
Yeah, I don't know. I believe Commissioner Doherty raised this point, was that, maybe the council said, well, these appointments are still in the charter. We'll take another bite at this apple when we amend the charter later. And Commissioner Garcia was like, no, I don't think that's what happened. I think maybe that is what happened with at least some of the council members. I can't say for sure every council member felt that way, but I think some council members did want to take another bite at the apple when this came up for a charter amendment.
Okay. So you agree with Doherty that so my interpretation at the time was, this is it for now. It's not even, it can't override what's in the charter. Don't worry about it. More to come is how I interpret it at the time. Like, we will settle this at a later time.
Yes.
Okay, another dumb argument. We talked about this a little and we won't talk about it again. But the idea of this is also a loss by the mayor. It's not a loss by the mayor. It's concentrating power in the executive branch. Stop with that, Casey Carl. You're insulting all of our intelligence. And it makes me suspicious. When people use arguments that insult my intelligence, I assume they have bad intent. So stop doing it. Here's a question about that, Josh. My sense is the clerk is pushing an agenda. It's reminding me of 2021 when he got real big behind the strong mayor change. It's clear he very much believed in that and thought it was important to implement. And I'm getting the same vibes again. And so am I just paranoid, or is the clerk pushing this in a way that I think is inappropriate?
So there have been comments that Casey has made, with City Clerk Casey Carl has made, which suggests to me that he's fairly supportive of this idea. On the other hand, there have been times where he's also offered potential compromises to the Charter Commission. Certainly, the more obvious compromise, which the Charter Commission has talked about, is add in some more department heads to what the list currently has. And I know Barry Clegg talked about adding in some of the department heads that are more public facing. They had some discussion about what those might be. Casey Carl proposed what was maybe a less obvious compromise, which was to add in the deputy commissioners. So there are deputy commissioners for the city operations officer. There's deputies under them, and because the city operations officer manages a ton of departments, and it would be not feasible for all of them to report directly to the COO. So they actually have 3 deputies, and each of them kind of manages a bucket of departments. So right now, neither under the proposal nor under the current system are those deputies subject to council confirmation. One potential compromise would be to still leave the department heads not subject to council confirmation, but to have those deputies be confirmed. It doesn't seem to have picked up a lot of traction on the commission so far, but it is an idea to explore.
It's not happening, and it wasn't mentioned at all at the meeting that we attended this week. So
correct, that was
I
at
don't
an
see that
earlier
going
meeting.
anywhere.
Yeah.
So I think back to 21 and the idea that there was an idea kicked around, which I thought was appropriate. I didn't agree with the overall goal of making Minneapolis a strong mayor system, but they mentioned, maybe we should implement this in 2025. It was, at the time, it was 21. We were about to have an election, and it felt like this is a big change, and maybe we shouldn't just have it take effect 30 days after the election. Maybe that's bad. Maybe we should give ourselves 4 years of runway to make sure we're prepared to do this. And I was thinking, okay, well, at least if they do this thing that I think is bad, we're going to have time to prepare for it. And that just never came up again. It was such a good idea that I thought, well, obviously this is built into the proposal somewhere. And stupid me, I didn't read through it enough to find, no, they had not prepared for some kind of time frame. They hadn't given us 4 years or even 2 years to implement this. It just took effect a month after the election. So when I hear good ideas bandied about at the Charter Commission, throwaway lines, I expect, well, that's not going anywhere. They're not going to do any of the good ideas. They're just going to push through what they want, concentrate power in the executive branch.
Yeah, that thing that happened with the strong mayor discussion was, to me, the most fascinating thing that happened at the Charter Commission during that whole process, because they were discussing at one of the government structure work group meetings that, we should delay this so it's not until the start of the next term, so that people, we don't affect the people who are currently running for these positions, so they still know what they're running for, and then the next term, people running for those next positions, they will know what they're running for. And there was some discussion, do we delay it till 2023 when the next council elections are? Do we delay it till 2025 when the next mayoral elections are? And then at the very next meeting, when they were talking about more things, I believe it was Casey Carl asked them, so what do we want as the effective date for this, and they just kind of like stared at him blankly as if they had no idea what he was talking about, and they were just like, "Oh yeah, it can just take effect in 30 days like normal. It's fine."
Yeah.
And it was like they had forgotten what had happened before. I would be very fascinated to know like what happened in between those meetings. I would guess somebody from the mayor's office reached out and put some pressure on them. That seems like the most logical explanation, but I don't know, maybe something else happened.
Oh, that's very conspiratorial. I just assume incompetence a lot of times.
I mean,
And
also
disorganization,
possible.
like nobody's taking notes. So, sorry to pick on Commissioner Garcia, but like she showed up to that meeting and appeared not to know that all of these people were currently appointed by the city council. She thought that had already changed. Like she didn't know what the current status of appointments were. That chart that is in I would assume they all would have studied up on before attending the meeting. That I think she's a co-chair of this work group.
Yeah.
She did not know the current status of that chart showing who's appointed, and she thought it had changed since they had put that government structure thing and it was approved in 21. So I think the Charter Commission conceives of itself as like above politics. We're just here for good government and efficiency. We're just a bunch of lawyers here and friends of lawyers who are doing what's right and efficient. We're removing politics from the process. We don't have politics. We're removing politics from the process. And I think there's a lack of imagination on their part, like conceiving of a world in which one day they think the mayor is bad, like they disagree with the mayor, it's a mayor they didn't vote for, or worse, someone terribly corrupt and stupid is elected mayor. We're living in an age where stupid, corrupt people get elected all the time. Social media allows people to become celebrities who really don't deserve it. And they can parlay that celebrity into getting elected mayor, for example, or president. And so it's not inconceivable. We could have a really stupid / corrupt mayor who makes some really bad decisions. And boy, wouldn't it be nice if we didn't strip the city council of the authority to approve that person's appointments for very important jobs, for example.
One other thing that the Charter Commission doesn't always seem to think about is what will the reaction be to the things that they do. And I would say that the council more aggressively exercising the powers it has left is a logical and should have been an anticipated reaction to reducing their powers.
Yeah.
And that's can continue. So if they again succeed in reducing the council's power, let's say they do succeed and only these positions get appointed. A logical reaction then would be to make the council use its remaining powers more aggressively, the powers other than the appointment power, and also the confirmation power itself for those positions they still have. The confirmation process might get even more uncomfortable and long for the positions that the council still has confirmation authority over, which would actually seem counterproductive to what the Charter Commission suggests some of its goals are. So even if the Charter Commission doesn't agree with the council on this matter, and in their perfect world there would be reduced positions, I think that kind of back and forth escalation is ultimately not going to be good for the city or for good government. And it would behoove the commission to, for a change, try to work together with the council and find some sort of compromise.
If you only let them appoint 3 people, they're going to, like, I've got a problem with what's happening in regulatory services. I got a problem with what's happening in public works. And I'm taking it out on your next COO appointment. They're going to get a really hard time at the city council. I could see that. So St. Paul was used as a big talking point in 21. This is the city we need to emulate. This is the city who has a strong mayor. It's one of the twin cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul. Why don't we just be like St. Paul? They have a strong mayor. Just talk to death in 21. And you know what St. Paul does? And I appreciate Charter Commission Chair Barry Clegg bringing up the fact that St. Paul appoints, what is it, like 20 department heads they appoint?
Yeah,
St.
2025, they said something like that. Basically, they appoint, the mayor appoints all the department heads, and all of them are confirmed by the council.
Seems like it works. I don't know. Why not be like St. Paul? If they were our big heroes and people to look up to when it came to government structure,
right?
Why is it such a problem to have the council vote to confirm people? Also, in 21, it was pointed out, like, that's how the federal executive branch works. We have a strong executive. It's not like you have the legislature going in and telling, like, the Commerce Department how they should be doing their job, or the Defense Department, for example. They vote to confirm all those department heads.
I mean, not only that, but they confirm a lot of the deputies. Like, they confirm tons of people at the federal level. And I'm not saying we should go that far, but even at the state level, too, we have this division of powers, and there's still quite a few confirmations that go through the legislature. There are some weird things about the way that process used to work, but I think they've started to fix some of that. So I don't see why a strong mayor system necessarily needs to have like 3 or 5 appointments that are subject to confirmation. Many of them have quite a few more than that.
Yeah. My point being that the arguments are shifting underneath us. In 2021, it was be like the federal executive branch, be like all these other governments, especially be like St. Paul. Look how close they are. Why can't we just be like St. Paul? And they appoint department heads in all these places, and the council votes to confirm, or the legislature votes to confirm. It's not turning out to be a problem in those places. This is a solution in search of a problem.
And I do wonder if maybe there's a long-term goal to move further than St. Paul in some of these areas, and then people can start arguing over in St. Paul to make similar changes. Oh, why can't you be more like Minneapolis once they have managed to get a stronger mayor over here?
You are so conspiratorial, Josh. I'm over here assuming stupidity, and you have Chamber of Commerces are banding together to try to spread the disease of strong executive forms of government. I talked about this a little at the beginning, but even in the case of the department head who is like very low profile, and you think, well, why give the city assessor a hard time? This is just a professional who's like calculating how much taxes people should pay. I barely know what the city assessor does. Nobody gets mad about a city assessor appointment. Some nerd up there. Nobody gets mad. But again, nobody gets mad. And so like the public hearing goes fine. It goes really smoothly. And what is the problem of having them come up, introduce themselves, and get some questions about like tax fairness and equity and air those issues? Like, even for the low profile job who you think, well, maybe we don't need the city assessor to be voted on by the city council. But like, what is the problem if it does work that way? What is the problem trying to be solved? There is no problem.
Yeah, and I think this is why, it is ultimately going to be a judgment call how many positions should be subject to council confirmation. And in that, I think it would be better to err on the side of having more positions subject to council confirmation, even if I'm not sure if some of those positions should be, because the council controls its own rules, and that includes the control over the confirmation process. And there's no inherent reason why that process needs to be the same for all of those individuals. The council certainly could have a more rigorous confirmation process for some of the more high-profile, high-ranking positions, and have a less rigorous process for some of the others. And the council can adjust and adapt that process as time goes on and they learn more about what the appropriate procedure is for each of these officials. On the other hand, if you err on the side, if you end up having too few positions which are subject to confirmation, there is no remedy to that other than amending the city charter again.
So this is the first time I've seen, I was pleased to see that Commissioner Doherty was on this work group because she was the only one skeptical. She made the point that there is a distinction between being a boss, because some other commissioners seem to think like this is about solving the 14 boss problem. And so she's making a distinction between the council being bosses and having input on who the mayor appoints every 4 years. Like those are two different things. You are not a boss simply by having input on who the mayor selects to run these very important points. And I was worried about her because like one person in a room full of people who are very sure, who have a totally different reality, it felt like gaslighting. It's like, no, none of what these people are telling you is the truth. Don't believe them. They were so insistent that all of these things were problems, and she was skeptical. And I'm sure she doesn't follow city government as closely as you and I do. And so I was worried she would just retreat and say, well, if all these kind of smart lawyers are here telling me that it's this way and not the other, maybe I'm wrong. But at no point did she like retreat and say, actually, I guess maybe I'm wrong. She kind of held up to the gaslighting. And so I commend you, Commissioner Doherty, for being a voice of reason and skepticism all through that and not backing down from what those people were telling you.
And she was certainly the most skeptical. She's on one end of the spectrum where she's maybe even okay with leaving the system as it is now. On the opposite extreme, there are commissioners who want to go, fully with what the proposal is, or maybe even go further in limiting what positions are subject to council confirmation. There are also a few commissioners who are in between who seem to like the idea.
Who are they? Name them, Josh. Name them.
I think from what I've heard from the comments, to varying extents, Clegg, Mecke, and at a previous meeting, she wasn't at this meeting, Commissioner Sandberg, all seemed open to some kind of compromise. They did, and I may be forgetting some, so I apologize to any commissioners who think they're in this group that I'm forgetting, but they did seem to see some of the arguments for reducing the number of positions subject to council confirmation, but they did also see some of the arguments for this being an important check of the legislative branch on the executive branch, and it's important for council members to have relationship with the department heads. So some of these open to some compromise, such as these more public-facing positions or whatever it might be.
I'll believe it when I see it, Josh. But
okay. Yeah.
Josh, maybe you can send them a link to this podcast episode when it comes out. And I'm sure they will be very persuaded because it begins by me calling them a bunch of senior citizens, unelected senior citizens who have a political agenda. And I'm sure they'll be very persuaded by our, maybe the way I frame my public arguments could use a little work. Sorry, charter commissioners who are open to this. I'm sorry for calling you a bunch of senior citizens who are out of step with Minneapolis politics. Please consider these arguments and change your mind before you go too far again. So what else is going? Have we covered this sufficiently, Josh? Any big points about this?
The other thing that was really interesting that wasn't like technically related to this, but was just an interesting thing that happened at the meeting. Commissioner Garcia expressed concern about the budget amendment process and the fact that there were so many budget amendments.
Oh.
Which I found really interesting because the budget process and amending the budget is one of the things that is squarely in the legislative sphere and is one of the things the Charter Commission wanted the council to be able to still have as a power to exercise. So I just found it a little concerning that charter commissioners were criticizing the council using the powers even they, in their own amendment, said they wanted the council to have.
Yeah.
And when things like that are said, it makes me wonder whether some of the arguments about, strong mayor, strong council were not entirely sincere.
So this is such a good point. They clearly have a political agenda. They think the council exercising any power, some of them, Garcia in particular. Was Garcia appointed recently? Because she's got to go. She is not good at this. Doesn't seem to know what's going on most of the time.
She's been around for a while, I think, as most of them have.
It's very concerning. The idea that there's a problem with the budget amendment process, that they should have just worked it out with the mayor behind the scenes or deferred to what he wanted. There's some kind of problem with the council's exercise of the power of the purse, which is one of the only things they have left. There's not a problem with that. It's not illegitimate. This is how it works every year. Maybe this is the first year you've paid attention. And it actually was this is the point that Commissioner Doherty was making, is that it worked out really well. A lot of the amendments passed unanimously, some near unanimously. Very few were on even a modestly split vote.
Right.
And so it went maybe the smoothest budget amendment process, one of them, I won't say the most, but one of the most I have seen watching this for a decade. So
yeah, I think last year was relatively smooth as well, but certainly thinking back to the previous council, those were some contentious, budget processes. So to criticize this one, did seem interesting. I did look up, Commissioner Garcia was originally appointed in 2014. She's been reappointed more recently. Her current term expires at the end of 2025.
Okay. I have a problem with the judges just reappointing. If there's an existing commissioner who reapplies, they seem to reappoint no matter what. And some of these people just need to not be reappointed. I would accept a blanket position that nobody gets reappointed because we need some fresh blood on the commission. And I'll leave it at that.
Well, I would push back a little bit, and I think there is a balance to be struck between getting some fresh blood in the commission, getting new perspectives, and also maintaining some of that institutional knowledge. So I don't know that I would immediately replace everyone, but certainly would replace them at a faster rate than they seem to be being replaced.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if these judges can't be bothered to do any research, better that they all change over than simply reappointing everyone who wants to come back. If that's the choice, I'm not expecting these judges to care or put any effort into distinguishing good from bad or people who are attentive or not attentive. Just, if you're going to be lazy about it, just don't reappoint anyone. Let's roll the dice on some new people. Okay.
Yeah. And I think the thing for people to remember is that ultimately, although the Charter Commission can put this on the ballot, it will have to be approved by voters. So if they put forth a bad idea, don't vote for it.
That's right, Josh. The Charter Commission is not a bunch of dictators. This will end up on the ballot, and we're sounding the alarm almost a year ahead of time. Don't say you weren't warned. Wedge Live podcast listeners, you know what's happening. If this starts to make progress in a form that is alarming and is anti-democratic, stay tuned to Wedge Live and Josh Martin.
And there will be a public hearing at some point too, so people will be
which
able to
no
make
one
their,
will go to.
their
No one will
views
attend
known.
that public hearing. Thank you for that warning, Josh. Is there anything else going on at the Charter Commission that we need to be aware of?
There are other things going on at the Charter Commission. So there's this very large package of amendments that's being proposed by the city attorney's office. And I've looked through it as well, and I will say I do think most of it is pretty non-controversial, clarifying things, fixing some technical issues, and a lot of it, might even get passed on like a 13-0 vote on the council so that it doesn't need to go on the ballot. The issues that are getting more discussion are this one, of course. And then there's also some discussion about the changes to boards and commissions. So some of it's minor clarifications. They are, I believe, making some changes to the Civil Service Commission, which are larger. They're moving a lot of the detail, or proposing to move a lot of the detail that is currently in the charter for the Civil Service Commission into ordinance, and having less detail on it in the charter. And then the last thing they're doing with boards and commissions is they are adding the Ethical Practices Board to the city charter. So that one has gotten some discussion as well. I believe they changed the number of positions on they expand the size slightly of the Ethical Practices Board, and they also they said something about the Ethical Practices Board being able to actually enforce the ethics code rather than making findings and making findings and recommendations on it as they do now. I'm not entirely clear what that means, and especially what that means in regard to elected officials. So I would like to hear more about that, so I can make an educated opinion on that amendment. And that one is going to be discussed by the Amendment Review Committee, and they'll do some more review and see what's going on with that. It changes the term length to 4 years from 3 years. That's the other big change from the current ordinance. I know one other thing that got brought up very briefly was a change in, I think this was at the General Language Review Workgroup meeting, there's a change in the vacancy filling rules. So they would change it so that if there's different ways for vacancies for council right now. If it gets appointed, if the vacancy happens early enough in the term, there's a special election, that wouldn't change. If it happens a little bit later in the term, then the council appoints someone who serves until the general election happens, and then that person takes over who gets elected in that election. They would change it so the person the council appoints would just serve the remainder of the term. And then if it happens really late in the term, and this happened with Andrew Johnson this year, then it remains vacant until the person is elected in the general election, and then that person takes office, which is what happened with Irene Chowdhury. And what they're proposing in that case is the position would simply remain vacant for the remainder of the term. So that's gotten some discussion.
Okay. So my sound effect board is broken right now. I was going to play Lisa Goodman chastising you for just droning on and on about you're wasting everyone in the audience's time, Josh.
Fair enough. Yeah. Certainly the highest profile of the changes is the change to the appointments as of this time. And we'll see what else develops.
It's just a missed opportunity for comedy when I can't get my sound effects board to work. I don't know why it's broken. It's all on a website. It should just work. Shame on you, Riverside FM, I pay so much for the service, and when the sound effects don't work, it's very disappointing. I will add them in, though. The audience will hear it, but Josh won't be able to feel the shame of hearing Lisa Goodman chastise him for wasting everyone's time.
And I feel like everyone's time is being taken up, including all of the people in the audience.
All good information, Josh. People should listen. They would be more informed if people could listen to you. But in the age of TikTok, is anyone capable of listening to 5-10 minutes of explanation about the charter? Hopefully we kept this 60-minute episode about the Charter Commission exciting, and people were able to pay attention all the way to the end. But do you have any recommendations about the new year, Josh? What will you be doing? Do you have any? I hate to ask people about their goals or New Year's resolutions because I know I don't make any goals
Yeah.
or resolutions. But are you the kind of person who
No.
sets goals for yourself? Good. People who set goals and rub it in our faces about how together they are as people should be ashamed of themselves. Keep your goals and your resolutions private. That's how I feel about that. Are you looking forward to anything in the new year, Josh?
I mean, certainly politically, we'll get to see the new council take office and organize itself. That'll be interesting. Both personally and due to my goals for the city, but also just in covering that will be interesting. Let's see. Yeah, I'm boring. That's what comes to mind right now. Still politics on the brain.
I have not tried to find out. I have not been poking at people for inside information about who the next council president will be. And I don't know if by the time this episode comes out, we will already know. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe we'll know.
But I have
by
not
then.
tried to find out. I just know that it will be someone vastly superior to who we currently have as council president. And that's good enough for me. Well, thank you for spending an hour with me. Deep in the heart of the holidays, Josh Martin spending an hour of his holiday time with me. I'm grateful. I'm grateful for you, Josh, at the end of 2023. That's one of the things I'm grateful for. And I hope to see so much more of you in the new year. That's one of my New Year's resolutions. Have more Josh Martin on the Wedge Live podcast. Thank you, Josh. It's been the Wedge Live podcast. I'm your host, John Edwards. Thank you for listening.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.